Before we get into the episode, a quick reminder that this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and nothing should be construed as investment or legal advice. Now for a word from Onramp. Onramp is a Bitcoin asset management platform built on multi-institution custody. Leveraging our partnerships with industry veterans BitGo and CoinCover, Onramp's multi-institution custody is a segregated vault, requiring 2 of 3 institutions at any point in time to sign once a client's unique permissions have been met. Our industry-leading best-in-class approach to custody helps individuals and institutions secure new and existing Bitcoin positions. All keys are held in deep cold storage and kept 100% offline, managed with institutional-grade security best practices. The custody solution eliminates single points of failure and reduces counterparty risks, ensuring maximum security and peace of mind. Onramp's suite of products includes our custody offering, a spot Bitcoin fund, private wealth services and inheritance planning, and managed wealth for advisors. Whether you're new to Bitcoin or a veteran in the space, we would love to connect with you to understand your needs and how we can serve you. Please visit our website at onrampbitcoin.com, where you can schedule a consultation and connect directly with our team.
Let's be clear, Bitcoin is an international asset.
We are spending like drunken sailors.
Bitcoin is the only economic entity where the supply is unaffected by the demand.
If you want to preserve your wealth, you have to convert that currency into an asset that's scarce, desirable, portable, durable, and maintainable.
My name is Andy Edstrom, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to the second episode of Scarce Assets, a show that examines scarcity, the most fundamental driver of economics and markets, and the scarcest asset of all, which is Bitcoin. Today, I'm happy to be here with my co-host, Jesse Myers, and our guest, the brilliant Jeff Booth. Now, I had the privilege of saying a few things about Jeff. Just like our guest last week, Preston Pish, Jeff is a professional investor, both in Bitcoin and outside of Bitcoin. He's an entrepreneur and an investor, and probably the clearest, most cogent communicator of complex topics that I've ever met. I'd say this skill is most evident in his exceptional book, The Price of Tomorrow, which I have read cover to cover twice and can attest that it's one of the best books I've read in years, and I'm constantly recommending it to people. Now, Jeff is currently investing in Bitcoin companies on behalf of Ego Death Capital, and in the interactions I've had with him over the years, I've found him to be extraordinarily kind, not least because he came out of nowhere and wrote a review of my book, and I couldn't be happier to have him as our guest on Scarce Assets. So, Jeff, how are you today? Did you get any sleep last week? I don't think my man Jesse here did.
Yeah, I'm excellent, thanks. And thanks for having me on. Honored to be following Preston on this as your second guest.
Well, I'm super excited to talk to you. We both are. And, I think I'm just going to dive right in with the big question, which is I want to take full advantage here of your skills at distilling complexity into simplicity. So I'm going to start with the big question here, if you don't mind. Would you be willing to give us the potted version of your thesis, both about deflation and why Bitcoin is the only practical solution you found for our system as it exists today?
Sure. The and I think this is I think it's so insanely simple that that people get confused about how confusing the existing system is meant to be to confuse them, but it's insanely simple. The natural state of a free market is deflationary, and why is that? Because we search for things that give us more value. And we don't use things that give us less value. So entrepreneurs creating more value for us and us using the things that provide us more value, the output of that is deflation over the long term. Short term, you can have supply constraints, you can have certain things, but over the long term, what entrepreneurs would do, or what people do, we solve problems to create more value. That is the natural course of the free market. And technology is a lever on that we invent to make the job easier. and the technology is moving exponentially. So those two things given together, then what should be happening in the overall global market is prices should be falling through that action to all people on the planet, and people on the planet should be able to work less and get more on a never-ending scale. But we don't live in that system. We live in a system based on debt, which needs to, and if the pricing was allowed to fall, the debt would reset, and the debt would collapse. And every single thing in the world has counterparty, other than Bitcoin, has counterparty risk to that system failing. And so we put up with a system that we constantly increase the monetary units to drive inflation and essentially devalue currencies to be able to make prices go up. And so why Bitcoin in that is it's imposing that discipline on the world. So if you're measuring from Bitcoin, all prices are falling, and they're falling exponentially, and they will forever. They'll continue to fall because it's decentralized and secure and hard capped. And so what drives the confusion is most people are measuring from the other system. And even when they're measuring Bitcoin, they're measuring Bitcoin price, which actually reinforces that they're measuring the price through the lens of the debasing system. So it's actually a very, very simple concept. Prices fall to the marginal cost of production over a long period of time, period. Every economist would argue that. And Bitcoin is measuring that happening. And so if you're choosing to measure from something other than Bitcoin, then you're choosing to measure a system that's increasing prices by decreasing the value of your money, rather than a system that's allowing abundance to flow to you.
Love that distillation.
It's such a good summary there, Jeff. And I have to also jump on what Andy said earlier, complimenting your book there. It was one of the important things I needed to read. It was sort of dependent for me, coming from the traditional establishment worldview about everything I learned in business school, about how the world works, how business works, how money works. And I needed that book to use the framework that I understood of like technology exponentially improves to then create this point out the dissonance there. Like, well, technology exponentially improves, yet we have this monetary system that's incompatible with it. And that was a necessary thing for me coming from the establishment worldview. I guess I say that as an encouragement to anybody out there who's having trouble getting through to a friend or colleague about Bitcoin. You kind of need to start with the price of tomorrow as like the fertile ground for sowing the seed of Bitcoin before you can really have informed conversations with somebody who's an MBA, for example.
Jesse, you know what, that means a ton, and thank you for that. But actually, it's broader than kind of our lives are impacted by other people impacting us, right? That we don't see something, and all of a sudden we do, right? Sometimes we can't even put the finger on what it is that changed our mind, and then our mind is forever changed, or we see something that never existed before in our lives, and once we see it, we can't unsee it. And so we don't know how that travels, and we also don't typically talk about reinforce who brought that to light in the first place, and it actually doesn't matter. That's what that's what the world looks like, and that's what our place in the world looks like. We're both emergent in creating it, and we ride on top of it. So it's kind of a two-way street. So and a lot of times, like I can't even tell you, and I don't know for sure where I came up with some of this in the beginning, but I can't tell you that maybe somebody else said something to me that I can't even remember specifically that helped me see it. And so that's how the world works. And there's a whole bunch of people stuck in a framework that is exactly the opposite to how is essentially measuring the free market. And they're stuck. They don't know they're stuck, and and I think about a lot of Bitcoiners too. And once you see it, you believe everybody else should see it immediately, and change doesn't happen that fast.
Well said. Double underscore, by the way, on Price Tomorrow, the book. And yeah, I can definitely say from personal experience, as someone who advises people for a living, they never remember whether you advise them or somebody else said something. People misattribute all the time.
And it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. Like if what you care about is kind of making the world a better place, then it doesn't matter whether you had attribution to it or not.
It's true. It's true. All right. So I want to switch gears a little bit here, Jeff. It must have been, over the last few years, an interesting time to be investing in Bitcoin companies. Not that it's ever not an interesting time, but especially in the last few years, as you've been doing with Ego Death. So 2 related questions for you. First, what are some of the things you've learned about Bitcoin by investing in Bitcoin companies? And then also, have you learned anything either about VC investing or private investing or investing overall as a result of investing in Bitcoin companies?
Yeah, so lots to learn, but we had a thesis probably that was very different. And I'll say, I was fortunate enough to see the internet wave, early in the internet wave, built companies. And I remember actually similarly to what's happening in Build Direct. I remember when my parents said to me and others around me said, "What are you doing?" Right? This is nonsense. Like you're going to build an online company. And because you could see what was happening and how all value would move to something, but something new that delivered more value to people, and I wanted to be a part of it. And it was so exciting. I made a million mistakes, but the most talented people on the planet were working in this space, in the internet, and so I never thought I would get a chance to see that again. And what I see in Bitcoin is something way more profound. It's bigger than the internet. It's bigger than, and the type of people that are joining this are not just joining it to be able to build incredible value for other people, and do well on the back of it. They're joining it because they know this the system can't solve the system problem that exists in the world today. And so as they come into this and as they're building onto it, I just actually cannot believe I'm fortunate enough to be a part of this ecosystem and invest in these extraordinary entrepreneurs that are building the future of what the world's going to look like. I pinch myself every day that I get to do that. Now, the other thing I would say that is different is if you truly understand Bitcoin and you understand prices fall to the marginal cost of production in everything, then barriers can't be built around your business. Monopolies can't be built around your business by using fiat rails to be able to hold other people out. What it means is you constantly have to deliver value, and that value is other people are going to see that value. They're going to copy you, and they're going to compete more value. And unless you're constantly providing more value for users, your business won't succeed. And so we think very distinctly about that when we're funding entrepreneurs, when we think about it as a much longer ride than typical what venture would look like. And we think we want to be a part of that journey with those entrepreneurs. So you have to love the people you're working with, and because you know it's going to be a long journey, and you realize that they're going to make mistakes as well, and not everything's going to work. But what a crazy adventure! And then some of those companies even some of the companies that we've funded, like if you look at what Fetty's doing, and these could be, these could be major kind of utility type companies of the future. They will have to constantly innovate to do that. They will have to grow. There's lots of different things, but they'll do that by creating value for users. And what we think is 10 to 100 times the value that people are getting today. And that drives in a massive growth curve on these companies by solving these problems. So it's just and I don't know if you know this. I don't know when this podcast is coming out, but today we launched the launch of our new fund, $100 million fund, to be able to invest in Series A, because you think about Bitcoin only entrepreneurs. There's a gap in the market, and those entrepreneurs don't want to go to VCs that invested in a whole bunch of altcoins, shitcoins, and everything else. They told them that this would happen, right? And so you want an investor that's a long-term partner. And so there's a gap at the Series A space in funding. So we launched today a Series A fund and brought Lynn and Preston on as partners.
Huge congrats. And that's a sizable number. That's a very large number in the Bitcoin space.
Yeah, it is. And Preston mentioned he was like, well, some exciting things, but I guess I can't tell you about it yet. So a week later, now we know.
It's super exciting, and Preston's become a really good friend of mine through actually many Bitcoiners have, but Preston's become a really good friend through you get to know people, you get to know them very deeply and everything else, and he's been extraordinarily on as an advisor in the first fund, and so him joining the fund as well as Lynn's, I could say the same for Lynn. It's remarkable. You get to work with just brilliant people. I couldn't imagine being anywhere else.
Yeah, I can attest to the brilliance and the character of all those names you mentioned. You mentioned Fetty, by the way. Hat tip to Obi, another just incredible positive player in the space, right? With his exchange, he went Bitcoin only early. They were doing, I remember, attestations right before anyone, trying to build some trust in the industry years before all the mayhem and carnage that happened in the last bear cycle. So that's just phenomenal. Well, very excited for you and your team and what you're building in the space, because these companies thus far in Bitcoin haven't had a lot of access to capital, let's be honest, and especially experienced capital driven and directed by people who have significant experience, not only investing in Bitcoin, but in other spaces. So that's a huge development.
And selfishly, and actually for the Bitcoin only entrepreneurs and everything else, what's actually happening is they're building venture type returns on top of a venture type asset. Mm-hmm. So think that through. So if you can deliver that type of value 10 to 100 times, and the market explodes on this, and you're collecting and you're denominating your balance sheet in Bitcoin, and some of the companies we've already funded are already profitable. They're growing extraordinarily fast, and they're denominating by creating the acceleration of Bitcoin adoption globally. They're creating Bitcoin on their balance sheet, which is also, at least in relation to fiat currencies, rising against everything else. So I actually can't believe other people don't see it. I can't believe that the massive part of the market there's an asymmetry, and people can't see it because it's the most exciting spot to invest around, and just the people are amazing.
That's a huge opportunity, and of course the inverse of that is the opportunity cost, which is the question I've always asked myself. I've written very, very few checks into Bitcoin companies, but more than zero. And the question is, am I going to make more than just holding Bitcoin on this opportunity? And of course, there's other benefits to the long run to being involved in building on Bitcoin. But exponential times an exponential could turn out well.
Yeah, Jeff, I want to follow up on that. In my mind, that means that a key tenet for success for Bitcoin startups is to hold Bitcoin on the balance sheet. And the idea of like you would want to be generating Bitcoin flow rather than cash flow, right? and positive, and retain those earnings as Bitcoin. Is that something that E002 feels is essential to success here?
Yeah, what I would say, so it's harder to on a podcast in this amount of time to kind of go as deep as you'd need to. But we've actually built treasury management with different companies to be able to make sure that they're look, and it depends on the life cycle of a company too. You wouldn't want to be caught short and then Bitcoin's volatility hurt you and not being able to make payroll or something like that. So we've helped our companies create a treasury management strategy, and then depending on that, but over the long term, yes, you'll acquire more Bitcoin. In fact, the way to acquire more Bitcoin will be investing into, after, because mining gets less and less as a percentage amount of Bitcoin. The way we'll be investing in or providing value to others, right? Or investing companies that provide value to others, and that's the best way to accrue more Bitcoin.
Let's see.
It does remind me of two anecdotes of Jeff Bezos saying that when he was looking at starting Amazon in the first place, the inspiration for it was that he found out that internet usage was growing 3,200% year over year.
Right.
And then also Andy Radcliffe, Silicon Valley VC, always recommends starting your career at a place that's growing 100% year over year for the last few years. That's like his whole thesis there is that the best thing you can do for your career is put yourself in a high growth company because opportunities will arise. And so it's kind of the marriage of like the best opportunity for talent and for capital is to be in a place where growth rate is happening. Your VC on VC mental model there speaks to that.
That's why I say it's literally incredible that there isn't a wall of money chasing it. That's still going to come, but and I think we just remember where we are in this cycle. Like Lightning has grown 20,000% over the last couple of years, right? But it's still relatively small, at least in most people's mind. Most people are still coming to terms with the asset class repricing everything else, let alone all of the other layer and how fast that's growing, and they can't see what's next until it's in front of them. So being able to build what's next and know, I can't say for sure, but have a high degree of confidence on and how much value these are going to give to users is a pretty extraordinary spot to be.
So related to being where the growth is, I also want to return to the theme of the pod, which is scarcity. Now, Jeff, I know your first career was in real estate, which is probably an industry that understands scarcity better than most. Was scarcity something, I'm curious, that you understood from an early time, or did it come to you as a result of experience?
I would say simple supply and demand makes that intuitively understanding, right? That if something's scarce, then that supply and demand, more demand than an asset will push that asset price up. Getting to Bitcoin, and you know this even in the book, I probably had a 5% kind of probability weighting of Bitcoin failing when I wrote my book, and that wasn't Bitcoin failing. That was my misunderstanding of why it wouldn't, right? And so that's really important to note. And so I'd done some of the work. I held Bitcoin. I bought a lot more as I was writing the book because it made intuitive sense, and it felt like the only thing that could resolve the conflict in financial system by allowing a transition mechanism. So one system would get worse and worse, and one system would get better. But it wasn't until I tried to disprove that hypothesis, it was one of the things I love about Bitcoiners is they're kind of don't trust, verify, and they're constantly attacking themselves, right? Attacking and so going through that work and understanding why in my opinion it wouldn't fail, and it would stay decentralized and secure. Now you realize, you have a rock solid foundation, that scarcity, that must reprice the entire world. Not might. If it stays decentralized and secure, it must. Right. So then the question comes: how would it break? Who would break it? Would governments? How could they break it? What would happen? What are all the games that would be played from the existing financial system, which dominates our control today, to this new scarce asset, or scarce and decentralized and secure asset? What would that look like? And that's why nothing surprises me from the what the world looks like. It's just, it would naturally look like that as Bitcoin imposes that discipline on everything.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Arthur Conan Doyle quote: "Once you've eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth."
So I love that. I love that. I had forgotten that quote, but I love that because now you don't have to go from the debasing system through all the confusion and try to understand economics that is largely made up to be able to confiscate, to hide that fact that prices fall to the marginal cost of production. The most simple economic terms. And everything else, I'm going to change the value of this asset so the bank doesn't fail. I'm going to do this. All of the three-letter words and the just complete nonsense that people are looking through to try to understand. And it's really confusing. You almost think, is it made to look that confusing to hide the theft in money? And is all economics, everything, PhDs, the entire thing, the entire amount of waste in the system, all to defraud people? I don't think it actually. I think there's a belief, and people believe that, and it feeds on it. But if you just looked at the objective facts on the truth, what the free market looks like versus what this looks like, and then you'll have this coping that people say, well, it can't be a free market, but then they'll advocate for a free market in their own business, right? It's so crazy. But so now, if you know that you have something scarce, decentralized, and secure, and if it stays decentralized and secure, and scarce, then it is repricing everything else. Then you change your frame from the future looking backwards instead of from now looking forwards. And what would happen, and what would be what would those events look like on both systems? And it's really easy to see. I'm shocked that it's so hard.
It is, and the complexity thing. By the way, I'm almost all the way through Lynn Alden's book Broken Money, and she does a phenomenal job of describing the monetary system. And of course, it is so much more complicated than Bitcoin. Bitcoin is hard to understand for most people. It was hard for me to understand, and of course, I'm still learning about it myself. There's new things I learn every day, every week. But the simplicity of the tenets and the assumptions are such that, yeah, it's for me, I still can't understand the complexity of the fiat system. I'll be honest with you. Having worked in the fiat system and being tasked with trying to explain it to clients, I still struggle with it.
I always come back to I always think about the world went from a geocentric model of the solar system and universe to the heliocentric model. And the geocentric model required epicycles, which were little tiny circles in the other planets' orbits, in order to make them make sense in a geocentric model. And so we got really, as we got better at studying the sky, we developed more and more intricate explanations to explain how things were happening, rather than challenging the core assumption.
Yeah.
And we live in this world where the monetary system has this religious reverence for this core tenet that 2% inflation is good and necessary, and you can't challenge that. And so you have to create epicycles around that in order to explain everything.
I use that all the time. That same
Maybe
thing.
not from you. I don't know.
But that's, you're so used to, and think about Galileo, or think about like how long that took to change minds. And sure, the minds are going to change faster this time, but that's what people are fighting through. And it's amazing to see somebody. So it's amazing to see somebody. And maybe many of the people that are listening to this podcast too. It's amazing to see somebody say, "Yep, the deflation is natural state of the free market," and then at the same time go, "Yep, I'm going to measure it all in a fiat debasing currency, right? And I'm going to make that stronger in my life." So when you like, I don't understand how those two things could be true at the same time, unless you decide, I want to concentrate all wealth to control me, because that path dependency requires, if prices should come down, and every year as technology gets better, that we should get more for less. But the only way to stop it is to steal more money. Then what would the system look like? Because it would have to get worse as technology moved faster and faster. The concentration of that wealth and what that system would say would have to get worse and worse as well. So that's actually why I say it's way easier just to, if it's true that it's decentralized and secure and capped at 21 million, and everybody should do their own work on why, then it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter actually about me, you. It will impose this across the world in time.
That's it. Bitcoin does its own thing, marches to the beat of its own drum. I sometimes think I'm literally, in some ways, physically connected to the whole system, and I know that this master marches independently to what I think or feel or care about, and there's nothing I can do about that. I wonder, Jeff, you break it down so simply from first principles to, okay, if true, then the following true, and it doesn't take, it takes like one axiom to begin, and then logic follows. Do you think that people struggle with that because they just anchor to the old system and they say, okay, I hear you, Jeff, your explanation sounds logical, and so I'm going to apply some significant probability to it being correct, but less than 100%, because everyone around me tells me something different, and so I'm like probability weighting the possibility that Jeff is correct, and sort of existing in some, I don't know, quantum state between two possibilities. How do people think?
Yeah, so I don't know how everybody else thinks. I didn't know. For me, I did the same thing, and like I said, I had a probability weighting that wasn't as high as it is today, and now, and so my work got me to as I was trying to disprove this, got me deeper. I haven't seen an argument, and like I put my book out 4 years ago. You can imagine how much I talk about this all over the world. I haven't seen somebody actually challenge the fact that prices follow the marginal cost of production over a long enough time period, because that's what we do, right? I haven't seen
the silence is deafening, isn't it?
So what I find is it's too hard to believe that prices could fall forever for people, because they are living in a different system, and they believe inflation is required for a productive society. And so I try to get into, and Jesse said this, like, why do they believe inflation is required? So, and like specifically why? Because you can hear people parrot that, but that, by the way, that didn't change. That doesn't change my core tenet. It's just they have a belief that inflation is required. And so now if you follow their belief that inflation is required, and you could just change the words and you could say, so you believe that people should steal a portion of your money every year to trade with other humans. That's your belief, because that's what you're saying, right? You don't vote for it. You don't have, so you believe that there should be a hidden theft in money that steals from some people and transfers to others to be able to trade around the world. That's what you believe. And so now you can challenge, okay, why do you believe that? And then they'll say, well, nobody would buy nobody buys things if prices come down. And then you say, what about that phone you have in your pocket, right? Or do you buy a TV? Or would you buy food? And you start to go down the path of, for them, why is it that they believe that? And as they start to understand that belief is just because somebody else told them so. And who might have told you so? Maybe potentially the people that are on top of the system that benefits from that. Is that who told you? And they start to unwind it for themselves.
Thanks for tuning in. If you're interested in exploring any of these topics further, or want to learn more about how we can help you secure a new or existing Bitcoin allocation, get in touch with our team at onrampbitcoin.com. We look forward to supporting you on your Bitcoin journey.
Invariably, it ends up being the people who tell, who instruct everyone on this system are, I think it's the non-malicious priests of epicycles. Yep. People who have created a career for themselves by genuinely trying to explain the system that's wrong.
Yep.
And that's that's required for that whole system to keep operating and perpetuating. I experienced that at business school. I at no point did I detect any of my professors trying to hoodwink me. They genuinely believed in the monetary system that they were teaching us about, and they'd made their careers in it. And that's how it's so convincing, is because everybody believes it except for the man behind the curtain or somebody who originated this fallacy. And everybody else since then doesn't realize that they are participating in a system that's premised on a faulty assumption.
And Jesse, I think you're right. I think that's what it looks like. And so most people within the system are caught in that same, trying to do good in the same system. And it would challenge their ego in such a way, their entire construct of their reality. It breaks down in such a harsh way. If everything you've taught who you are is wrong, right? So that's a really hard thing to take. Like I spent 50 years of my life talking about this thing, teaching people that's based on a mistruth, right? That'd be really hard to. So no wonder it goes on. It carries on, and so there's people that come in and just put their head in the sand. It can't be true. And when you ask them, they change the topic, right? So a lot of people, and we were talking about my thesis, they just change the topic. Yep, I agree with that. Now I'm going to change the topic.
Also, let's talk about something else.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about something related. And this question comes from my friend Brendan Lane, which is, what do you think the transition looks like, right? Will it be gradual? Will it be chaotic? Do you assign scenarios? How do you think about that?
And so that's hard to give a pithy answer of one thing, because there's so many different tail events and so many different things that are likely to happen on the way through. What I would say is this, though. If you're measuring from Bitcoin and you're spending more time in Bitcoin, you're actually already living in the future. So I keep getting asked the question all the time, when will it happen? Like it's a light switch. And like, I mean, from really good friends who know my work, and I said, it is happening, right? In the last, I use that house example that I use all the time. My house going from 1.4 million to 2.1 million in fiat, in Canadian dollars, but in the 3.5 years, and in Bitcoin going from 300 Bitcoin to 35 Bitcoin, right? I'm already living in the system that's repricing everything. Just that most people aren't choosing to. And so once you're living in that system and you understand it's repricing everything else, you also want to spend time with all of those people building to truth, hope, and abundance. And all of those people, like you guys, right? Why we've become friends, why there's so many brilliant people in this space, is those people are aligned to a bigger mission than themselves. And when you can, not that we have to agree on all the things, but when you can agree on the most important things, the rest is pretty easy. And so now, at first, and I've said this on multiple podcasts, I was a hypocrite because I had a hedge on the existing system blowing up. I knew exactly what would happen, all the steps that would make it blow up and what it would look like. And I had a hedge protecting myself in Bitcoin. And so that, by the way, that was quite shocking for me, to realize that I too was like that. So I can't complain about other people being somewhat on that path right now too, because I was. And it wasn't, and so I had some Bitcoin, but I had 90% of my time in the fiat world, boards and everything else in the fiat world. It wasn't and that's part of the reason for starting the fund. I need to resolve that conflict in me. I needed to move my time to the system I wanted to see in the world to help advance that. And so what I can say is, by doing so, it's just been so incredible. And so I'd love to see more people spending more time. Finding ways to spend more time. And I get asked that all the time. Where do I start? It's an open network. It's open to, you could start anywhere. You could start you could start by grabbing Bitcoiners, Ben from BTC sessions. Just put on a market, right? And you could do that in your town. You could run your podcast. You can run meetups. You could build a business on top of that solves a problem for others and create lots of value. There's tons of ways. If you don't want to start your own thing, you could start to get to know some of the great Bitcoiners that are building other things and see where you can help them. But there are immense amount of opportunities. Because it's growing so fast. And that talent in building the system is going to expand, and those people are going to be, some of the people here are going to look like kind of in the new system, the people who invented Google, and people that all the technology that we take for granted for today, iPhone, some of the people that we're talking about right now in our networks are going to be those people in time.
That's it. The future's here. It's just not evenly distributed. And get involved, people. If you feel compelled to do something in Bitcoin, do it. I certainly felt compelled. I know Jesse did. There's also different levels of involvement. You can jump in with both feet, go full-time Bitcoin like my man Jesse. You can sort of dip in and out of it as I have, based on the life constraints that I have. And there's so much to do. There's so much work to do.
Yeah. You're being a little unkind to yourself, Andy. If I was to characterize what you're doing and have done, I think you've recognized that your opportunity to contribute to Bitcoin is to help build the bridge between old world wealth management and a new world of Bitcoin, and that bridge needs to be built. And so, millions of people can cross that bridge once it's built. But that, I think that's emblematic of a lot of things in Bitcoin, where Bitcoin is its own protocol, its own island that exists, and it needs a lot of infrastructure around it to be built out and on top of it to be built out. and that connects to the old world in many, many places. And I think that's where a lot of opportunity lies over the next decade. And I'm sure Jeff feels the same way since he's invested.
I agree. But even Andy, like then I told you what you wrote a book on this. How many people that from writing that book had no idea about Bitcoin and now are really great Bitcoiners and moving forward? And how many people do you touch one person that then touches 10 million? So that's what I'm getting at. We all matter. And whatever way you want to contribute matters. And so and that's a really powerful thing in an open network, that anybody anywhere in the world can contribute in any way.
And multiple touches are important. So Jeff has nailed, the first principles, from the studs on why this is true. And yet, us being humans, we need repetition, I guess call it social proof, but you don't want to just hear the truth from one source. You want to hear it from multiple sources. And so if you're an individual out there that does Bitcoin and literally anything else, there's an opportunity for you.
Totally. Totally.
It's literally that simple. All right. Well, I'd actually like to switch gears a little, take a question from No Second Best on Twitter. And his question is, what technology that is not Bitcoin or AI, okay, not Bitcoin or AI, do you see, Jeff, as having the most potential to improve the world in the next 10 years? And maybe I'll also add improve the world and also perhaps be an investment opportunity.
Yeah, so technology is a lot of times a double-edged sword. The same thing that can improve can destroy the world. And so it's a tool that we use to make our lives better and if it's controlled by a very small group of people, it can make our lives worse. This is why all of the technology makes the world a more dangerous place without Bitcoin. All of the technology. Because from the existing system that has to steal that abundance. Now, remember, technology, if you just, and I don't know the number here, it's an unknowable unknown, right? But if I was to postulate on what the deflation rate should be right now, if you just normalize there was no debt, in other words, the productivity-led deflation rate, I would postulate that it's about -5% a year and expanding and going faster. And so the IMF just came out with a report that in the next 10 years, 40% of the jobs are going to go away. So what that means is the deflation rate is going to accelerate. What that means from the existing system is you could have 0% inflation rate. You can't because the debt would collapse. But you could have 0% inflation rate and it could still be stealing from you. Right. So you're not measuring from zero. You're measuring from negative. And so if you're capturing that and stealing that money, then the outcomes from that system that centralize, because it's based on theft, have to get worse. And the rate at which we're moving with technology, that's why I talked about the exponential rate. Remember, AI is the exact same rate of growth for about 60 years. It's just people are measuring it linearly. Instead of exponentially. And so they can't see the next step of the movie. They can't see the next frame of the movie because they're not watching how the movie is playing out. They're surprised that all of a sudden we have this. When you could see for sure it was that's what I talked about in the book, right? That's why there are 2 chapters on AI in the book, because you could see the exponential wave coming of what that would mean, and then what it would mean specifically for the financial system. So it's really important to note that people typically look in silos instead of systems. And so when you're asking a silo question of the technology that's going to make a difference on top of a system that must capture that technology and take the productivity that should flow to you in the form of lower prices to somebody else, then you're destroying the world as a result, because people will go to war and with very different weapons to be able to control other people. That's what and it'll get worse and worse. So there is no tech without Bitcoin. That is the path And in fact, it's such a profound path. I actually don't. Humanity might not survive that transition path without it. Um, and and then if you said what other things are going to accelerate it, robotics. Robotics is going to merge with AI, and most of the things we think about the digital universe today, and we can do this, and we can touch millions of people from this conversation, where we couldn't have done that before, or the cost to do that would have been so prohibitive. And AI is going to merge with AI is going to keep going. You're going to have artificial general intelligence, and then it's going to merge with robotics. And that those robots are going to take everything into the physical world and reduce the price at step functions exponentially there as well. And why that must flow to us in the form of lower prices is Bitcoin. Otherwise things break really badly.
Yeah, the logic of cybernetics. By the way, another book recommendation I have for people: Norbert Wiener. Guy was working with Claude Shannon at MIT. I don't know, not a century ago, but getting almost that long ago. And these basic concepts, as Jeff, you just pointed out, they've been known. The curves have been there. I only learned about this, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. But the evidence has been there, staring us right in the face, just like a lot of these concepts we talked about today. And there's really no arguing with the logic, in my view, on this stuff.
We haven't been able to. I would say that's why you build Bitcoin's so unique, and also that uniqueness makes it so hard to understand. Because there has never been in the history of humans something that could be decentralized and secure. Yep. So we always, because there wasn't, we always had to put an institution in the middle of that to protect us from governments taking our rights. And over time, those institutions would be co-opted by the money. Because money rises up, so money is superordinate to law, and they who have the money change the laws or fight the laws until they're changed, and so you see this repeat over and over again in history. Additionally to that, the winners write the history books. So our entire human history has this error code that replays through and through and through in these cycles. Until it hits a breaking point, and then replay and resets, and typically through global conflict, and then resets again. And we never had something like Bitcoin. So if we never had something like a Bitcoin, and all of the history books are written on other things, then it would obviously be hard for people to understand, because they're relying on their prior beliefs to be able to do this, and the work that you have to do in Bitcoin to be able to understand why this is different, why it remains decentralized, why it remains secure, why it remains hard capped, is the work that you have to do to then say what would that impose on society, what would it look like, what would the transition look like from a whole bunch of people who believe it can't happen because it's never happened to now it's happening.
What a blessing to, number one, be living this time, and number two, to have this tool that we can use, hopefully, to help manage this transition. I'm curious what you think. Obviously with the ETF approvals last week, major step to mainstreaming, yet people in power, politicians, are still struggling with this thing, still struggling to learn about it, wrap their arms around it. Do you think, what learnings or thoughts do you have about the political process, either in general, or what can individuals do to affect change and the right outcomes here? Any thoughts?
It's going to be messy. it's going to be messy as one person at a time understands what we're up against and moves over to the new system. But once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. And that's going to be messy around the world as most people give their power to politicians to be able to steal their power or hold their money in a bank or a regulated bank and you know that you have regulation on top of a system designed to steal your money. So how could that work? And then you have what's called a democratic process, but you don't have a vote in inflation and you don't have a vote in how much money is stolen. So the democratic process breaks down over time out of this, and you can see this happening. And the political process, which is driven by money, goes and lobbies for where the pockets of money are to favor their constituents. And those constituents don't know that this is happening either. And if you ask those constituents and you said, listen, we're going to build a new system, and that's in the rules of that new system is every year you're going to need to work less and you're going to gain more as a result. They would say, build it first and then I'll see. Right. So nobody would vote for that. So if you had a politician say that, they would be thrown out in their ear. They would be unelectable. So that's why you have to impose the rules globally on a new system, and the people moving to that new system are creating kind of a parallel system. But that means if most people don't see it, and most people actually make the system stronger through their actions, right? Oh, I just need enough to pay myself, right? And then I will one day do this, right? And so most people do the same thing. What about my family? What does it matter? And we're all we're self-interested. We play a movie in our head, and we're the prime actor. We're the actor of the movie, right? 99% of our actions are in our own head doing that. So, in other words, we don't typically do these things. We'll broadly, and I could tell I'm doing it for somebody else, but it's really for me first, right? You can see that through all society, and they believe, but they're so that belief is so strong that they're actually doing it for somebody else. If you looked at Elizabeth Warren as an example, she might actually believe that she's helping her constituents that she's destroying. She actually might believe that. And why? Because they go to her and they say, we love you, right? Fight those big banks, even though behind you're probably getting back. But they believe it. And so that existing system globally will continue to look like that. And most people, even if you just look at a lot of what will travel more on the internet, yelling at something, talking about the WEF, talking about creating a whole bunch of fear porn, or building to hope. What will travel? What will travel more? I would say the hope's way longer lasting, and it actually changes minds for. But if you want a quick hit, talk about the existing system. You'll get tons, and then you get a ton of virality. You get more people reinforcing you, and you'll make the existing system stronger. But through your actions. So if you just take the sum total of what we just said, it means this is going to play out for a long time. And it's going to, well, the new system emerges and the people building that new system build new rails and different technology that makes it easier and easier to interact with. And more people will walk across the bridge.
That's it. And all the more important to take the long-term view. The cycles in Bitcoin are dramatic, can be brutal. I do want to hit a focus now on the year to come that we've just started here in 2024. What are you excited for? You're excited for building the long-term solution, which is much appreciated. Are there any sort of tangible events or things you're looking forward to in the new year here that
So
you want to talk about?
let's play this ETF as a scenario on both sides, right? So and you'll see people that'll be binary on one thing. So the good news is it's going to credentialize this asset and bring a whole bunch more people on. So a whole bunch more awareness. You essentially now have BlackRock marketing Bitcoin. Now, if you understand Bitcoin to the level that you guys do, then you know it needs to stay decentralized and secure, and self-custody is the way to do that, and that's really important. But that means that BlackRock's going to bring on and make this asset class normalized, and others, and Fidelity, and normalize this, a whole bunch more Bitcoiners who are then going to learn that journey. I suspect that at the same time as that's happening, you could say, is this coordinated or is it not coordinated? But it might be coordinated. That Warren et al. Trying to drive the US away from self-custody and make Bitcoin illegal to be able to hold in self-custody might be coordinated. It might not be, but there's, I would say, if you read the tea leaves and you understand how systems work like this, and the power the power that Bitcoin takes from the most mighty of financial systems and political players that are extracting wealth and gives it back to people, you can understand that the fight it will be extraordinary. But now, so let's imagine a bunch of these ETF players or trying to fractionalize Bitcoin and drive enough. So by doing so, they'll short and drive prices down in the short in the short term, and combined with an office action through FinCEN, that could create some fear and some price pressure in the short term. But what will happen because of that? Bitcoiners who know about this asset class, and what's more and more people are having something decentralized and secure, will take those out of and put them into self-custody as fast as prices go down. It'll be just screaming. And that would cause a short squeeze of epic proportions, to the point that some major financial intermediary would be liquidated. And so that is one of the things that can happen. And that could happen along with the halving. That could happen after the halving. That could happen at some point. But I would say, not with a 90% probability, but I would say that some of these things are likely to happen. I just don't know how the game's going to be played. I don't have enough insight. I just know the first principles of Bitcoin, and I know it will force this in time. So I don't care about the price of Bitcoin measured to a fiat instrument. I care about Bitcoin repricing everything, which it's doing, and it doesn't matter. And so now take that out of, and take a different example. The liquidity of the system is, at some point, there needs to be a vast amount of liquidity pumped into the system. That liquidity will be a massive driver of Bitcoin. If there isn't liquidity in the system, you're going to have a deflationary spiral. And the deflationary spiral will wipe out assets and capital so fast, and they'll keep going until there's then it needs to be an exponential amount of liquidity to try to stop that from happening. But let's just pretend that kept going. Bitcoin would fall in that, but it would only fall in fiat terms. It would still rise against every other asset price. So I find the biggest probably confusion with even a bunch of people in Bitcoin is what we're talking about now. They're so used to measuring Bitcoin through a fiat instrument that they keep on doing that, and that's the error code. And if you don't, it doesn't matter. It's going to continue to reprice the world. And all assets, everything will fall against it.
Yeah, there's some very helpful charts out there about Bitcoin in and outs of gold terms for versus an ounce of gold, or versus a median house. And those are steady downtrends. And I fall into that trap. We all fall into that trap of paying attention to the dollar price of Bitcoin, when really it is about what's the purchasing power of your savings, and how is that changing over time, and what kind of life does that create for you and your family. And that's why I've flipped my switch. And you talked earlier about, like, people ask you if this is a light switch moment. But then he talks about how it's an individual choice, an individual process that everybody goes through independently. So everybody has their own light switch, and it's not an all or nothing moment. It's really it's a sliding light switch where you go from 0 to 100.
Totally.
And each individual does that, and collectively the world goes from light off to light on. But it's all because each individual has to recognize that my savings grows in this system, and my purchasing power appreciates in this system. And the current system, it's not the case. It's the opposite.
Yeah. And then you start going into, what does that change? And it changes the amount of things that changes, Jesse. And you know this, but I'm tempted to write a new book. And I've always said I wasn't going to write a new book, but I'm tempted. I'm tempted to write a new book on.
I would love to put in a pre-order for that one.
on what changes and how this looks on the other side. It's going to be a long play out, but it's a rise in consciousness of society is what happens.
Beautifully said.
I think Jeff's writing a new book. It sounds like it has to happen. I certainly look forward to it. Well, as we close up here, Jeff, any other topics you want to hit on, or places you want to direct people to learn more about your thoughts and your activities?
No, I just pleasure being on with you guys. Congrats on the new podcast. You guys are doing great work.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Pleasure's all ours. Really appreciate you coming on. What a fun chat.
Yeah,
thanks, Andy. Thanks, Jesse.